From the National Weather Service in Raleigh, it's Nick Petro with your Thursday morning, 11:30 a.m. update for Hurricane Dorian and its effects on central North Carolina. And there's not a whole lot of changes this briefing. We're kind of more in nowcast mode where we're just watching how it's all playing out upstream and monitoring the conditions and seeing how it matches up with our forecast, which, as I said, is doing pretty good forecast-wise. So bear with me here while I go ahead and show my screen, just realizing now that my screen was blank there. All right, very good. Okay, so here are some observations. So we're no longer looking at model data. We're looking at what's actually happening out there. And you can see where the center of Dorian is. It's east of Charleston. And a couple things I want to point out, and look for the little spotlight, the little red dot to kind of highlight some things. Here is the center of Dorian, and you'll notice some of the eye wall bands. It's not really nearly as intense of an eye wall as we saw a couple days ago, but clearly there's some enhanced winds. These red numbers you see on the screen, like right here, that's a wind gust to 47. This 53 right here, that's a wind gust as well, and 32, 30, 20, and so forth. You can see a a wind gust of 36 at Myrtle Beach. And by the way, in case you're wondering, that 36 is miles per hour, so 36 miles per hour. So anyway, a couple other things I want to point out. Clearly there is some rain that's already underway across a good section of southeast part of the state and along the coast and Outer Banks. Some wind gusts approaching 30 miles per hour. There's a 47 offshore there of Cape Fear. And another thing that, of course, folks have probably heard about are the warnings of the tornadoes that have occurred, particularly across coastal sections. There have been several tornadoes that were warned on and were observed there, Onslow County, western Carteret County, and along the coast. So anyway, a couple things I want to note here on these observations. Clearly, this band here is one that I'm keeping a close eye on. Obviously, we're keeping a close eye on the entire storm, but this band right here, basically just west of I-95 in South Carolina, is the band that many of our models have shown increasing in strength in terms of the winds as it moves up into east central North Carolina. So this is the band that I've been mentioning last couple of days may produce some pretty intense wind gusts along the I-95 corridor or just east of it tonight in the nighttime hours and overnight tonight. So we're going to be watching that and see if that does further increase in intensity. But if you loop this, the general direction that this band will be taking is kind of off to the northeast. So it is headed, basically along the I-95 corridor, up along the I-95 corridor, as a lot of the models have shown. There's, basically the forecast track continues to take the center of Dorian basically close to or right over the North Carolina coast. All right, so let's go ahead and jump over to the slides. And no changes, and again, keep in mind this briefing is just for central North Carolina. I would encourage, if you're curious about the weather briefings for the coastal sections, feel free to go to weather.gov, click on the coastal areas, and that'll take you to either our Newport, Wakefield, or Wilmington forecast offices, and then you can click on their PowerPoint briefings for details along the immediate coast. So anyway, tropical storm warnings remain in effect, as is flash flood watches. Really no changes in terms of, the hazards we're most concerned with: wind and flooding rain. Obviously, there's an elevated risk for isolated tornadoes. We've already seen a few tornadoes, particularly along the coast. That threat for tornadoes will continue this afternoon through early Friday morning, mainly east of I-95, we'll say. In terms of the wind, there is potential, obviously, for tropical storm wind gusts of 40 to 60 miles per hour and resulting down trees and power lines. And again, that's mainly east of US 1 corridor. And I'll especially say mainly east of the I-95 corridor. I think the top end, the top end of that wind gust range will be east of I-95. And again, the strongest wind gusts, we're already seeing wind gusts pick up, but the strongest gusts will be after midnight. And then finally, rainfall. We haven't really made significant adjustments to the rainfall amounts. We're still looking at 4 to 8 inches with higher amounts, again, east of I-95. And then west of I-95, 1 to 4 inches back to US 1. Again, in both of those corridors, the highest amounts will be east. So heavy rain of this type could, or this amount, can result in flash flooding. And again, that's basically from later this afternoon through about midday Friday. So all in all, not a whole lot of changes from what we've showed the last couple of days. Here is our updated max wind gust, so the highest wind gusts that we are forecasting. And this is a compilation of not only our forecast from our office, but also the coastal office. In fact, all the offices that serve the state of North Carolina. So you could see, the expectation is that wind gusts may top 100 miles per hour right along the coast in the Outer Banks as Dorian makes its pass by or along or over top the coastal areas. As you go back further towards the west, we again, this well highlights the concern for a swath of gusty winds along and east of I-95. This is tropical storm strength wind gusts here, frequent gusts in the corridor there from I-95 eastward. Back to the US 1 corridor, you could have a gust as high as 35, maybe 40 miles per hour, and that's why we've extended yesterday we extended the tropical storm warning a little bit further west, just to cover that risk for a few isolated tropical storm strength wind gusts. But the worst of the wind through this entire event, but in the nighttime hours, we are indeed expecting to be east of I-95. All right. So, and this is just another way to demonstrate what I just mentioned. Again, the threat for tropical storm force winds is greatest across central North Carolina between 2 p.m. today and 6 a.m. tomorrow. Again, the strongest wind gusts are expected tonight after midnight. All right, in terms of rainfall, switching our attention, really not a whole lot of change here. The highest rainfall amounts, the greatest risk for flash flooding will be east of I-95. Highest total amounts there near the coast. And then, as I mentioned, back to US 1, it could see, around an inch of rain near the US 1 corridor, up to perhaps 4 inches of rain close to I-95, and then 4 or more east of I-95. So, when you get back towards our friends in the Triad, not much rain, couple hundredths, maybe approaching a tenth, inch of rain or so back in the Triad, points south. Could be a little bit more across our southwest sections. Our friends in Anson and Stanley County could get maybe up to a half inch of rain. All right, so again, just to highlight another visual way here, there could be flash floods as far back as in the area highlighted in yellow, but the risk for flash flooding increases in the orange and even more so in the red areas. So that's what this graphic here is showing, the potential for flash flooding potential. All right. All right, tornado threat. We did tweak this up a little bit based on the tornado activity we saw this morning, and we're tweaked the orange area a little bit, pulled it back a little bit west. But the point is that most of the tornado threat will be confined well east of I-95. All right, these radar simulations give a general sense of storm timing. Don't necessarily take this as a forecast of strength or intensity, but just when these bands are going to move through. And I'll try to elaborate some more on this as we wrap up the briefing later. So the key point here is that the rain bands will further increase in both coverage and intensity as we head through the evening hours, and the worst of the wind and the heaviest of the rain basically expected, at least in the eastern sections of North Carolina, are expected basically from around midnight until the early morning hours. And then finally, during the morning hours on Friday, the storm shifts east and then exits the state by early evening tomorrow. All right. I wanted to mention, I didn't want to leave off the risk for mentioning river flooding. We don't expect this to be a big river flood maker. The best chance for any type of river flooding will be along the coast where the highest rains are. Remember, let me show you this here. Clearly, the fact that there is not a whole lot of rain in the upper basins in the area that I've got highlighted yellow, that means rivers will be reacting to what's falling in locally in east of I-95. So clearly, where we have the highest rain, that's why we expect any risk for river flooding to be mostly confined to the easternmost portions of the state. And that's basically what this graphic here is conveying. And even at that, river flooding will be pretty minor to moderate at most. We're not going to go through each hydrograph like we did the last 2 days. I just want to kind of show these as a point to make that, yeah, clearly the rivers are going to go up, on the Neuse at Goldsboro and Smithfield and the Cape Fear at Fayetteville and the Tar at Tarboro. There are going to be river rises, but not to the point of flooding that's expected at this point. All right. So after the storm exits tomorrow, what's the weather going to be like this weekend? Especially, for portions of central North Carolina along and east of I-95, where there's going to be a lot of tree damage and trees blown over and debris that needs to be cleared off the roads and that sort of thing. What kind of weather can we expect for that? And Saturday and Sunday are looking pretty good, dry. No weather to speak of, other than some early morning fog. But once that fog burns off, it should be mostly sunny with highs in the upper 80s to around 90. So we're looking for some decent recovery weather, albeit a little bit on the hot side. So be careful if you're, cleaning up any debris around your property or in your area. Just be careful of the heat impacts and take frequent breaks and drink lots of water. It'll be hot for recovery efforts this weekend. All right. A little bit out of order here. I apologize for that. I'll fix that before I send out these slides. But looking back at the river situation, no flooding again on main stem rivers in central North Carolina. I underline central North Carolina because the further you go closer to the coast, there could be perhaps some minor flooding on the main stem rivers again near the coast. Otherwise, flash flooding is possible on smaller streams and creeks. That'll still be a threat with the heavy rain. Okay, and as I mentioned, Hurricane Dorian will produce 4 to 8 inches of rain on the lower Cape Fear, Neuse, and Tar. Locally higher amounts along the coast, and a sharp cutoff of the rain between I-95 and US 1. So the Cape Fear, Neuse, Tar will see the greatest rises at east of Fayetteville, Goldsboro, and Tarboro, but some rises in those areas. All right. So let's wrap this up here. Again, not a whole lot of change, so our confidence is pretty high. Tropical storm strength wind gusts 40 to 60 miles per hour, resulting in scattered to numerous down trees and power lines. Greatest impacts east of I-95, and again, the strongest wind gusts after midnight tonight. 4 to 8 inches of rain east of I-95, higher amounts east, lesser amounts west. Once you get west of I-95, there is 1 to 4 inches expected. I will, in the far southern portions of Sampson and Wayne County, there could be some higher amounts, close to 8 inches or so. Want to definitely, I don't want to be remiss on that. And then from basically between the I-95 and US 1 corridor, 1 to 4 inches again, highest east, lowest west. All right. And again, let's not forget about that tornado threat. And that'll be mostly late this afternoon through early morning tomorrow. All right, our next webinar, we'll do a quick update, probably a look at observations and seeing how it's evolving. We'll do that at 5:30. 5:30 this afternoon, we'll do another webinar. And I'll be emailing these slides to everyone here shortly, and then we'll be updating the slides as needed throughout the course of the day. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I hit the